What do you think of when I say the word Salisbury steak? Does TV dinners come to mind? Maybe Swanson or Banquet? That's probably what the average person would be thinking of. I know it's probably what I would normally be thinking of because that's where we normally think of where we get our Salisbury steak. But actually, Salisbury steak is probably the original health food developed by Dr. Salisbury during the Civil War when we were losing more troops to illness than to combat. That illness, dysentery. So what Dr. Salisbury did was he came up with something made out of ground beef that could be cooked up with a gravy and that would help the digestive system of the average soldier so that they wouldn't have the same kind of issues that they were having before. Later on, it just worked out that it froze very easily along with turkey and meatloaf and chicken, and that's when it became TV dinners. But it's actually a terrific meal. So with that said, I'm Ralph. Welcome to my kitchen. Today we're making Salisbury steak, but not just any Salisbury steak, because I don't want you to confuse what I'm doing today with what is in the TV dinner. This is not like a $1.79 meal. This is going to be as bougie as I can make it. Let's get started. First, I've got some breadcrumbs in a bowl. To that, I'm going to add some salt, some pepper. I've got 1 egg. Going to add some Worcestershire sauce. Going to add about 2 tablespoons of olive oil. And the ground meat. Now the ground meat I'm using is an 80-20 blend of ground chuck. And that's probably the preferred thing to use. Now I'm going to mix all this up. It's easier with gloves. You don't have to do it with gloves. You want to be rather gentle with it. The reason for that is the more you work the ground beef, you can actually make it a little bit tougher, and you don't want to be making your steak tough. Nobody likes a tough steak, no matter what kind of steak that is. So just gently lift it up, get it all blended together. Now, get rid of all this. One last knead here. Make sure it's well blended. Now I'm using a mold that's actually made for making hamburger patties. And you may or may not have anything like that. This one's actually a little bit deeper because originally it's made for making stuffed hamburger patties. But if you don't have something like that, you can use a biscuit yolk cutter, or maybe some kind of a cookie cutter, or just form them up by hand. Just kind of eyeball it. But I'm using this so that I can get them fairly uniform. Now, what a lot of people do is after this point, they will kind of squeeze it on the sides, make sort of an oblong shape. I guess that's to make it look more like a steak, but it's not going to taste any different, so I really don't see the purpose behind that. Now I'm going to go ahead and just measure this patty to see about how much it's worth. This is coming in at about 11.2 ounces, so that's a pretty good sized patty. I probably can make this a little bit smaller. I'll just take a little bit away here. And I'm going to make several more of those. Okay, I've got the patties made up. I'm leaving them in the round because it's not going to make any difference to the taste. So I'm going to do what's easiest for me and the easiest for getting them packed together. Now I'm going to take these for just a few minutes put them in the refrigerator to help them kind of set up a little bit to make them easier to work with when I put them into the frying pan. Now over here at the frying pan, I had some bacon that I had in the frying pan, and I was doing that to kind of render it up so that I've got a good coating of bacon grease in there. That's what I'm going to be using for frying up the beef patties. Then I'm going to be using the bacon and adding that to our gravy coming up here in just a little bit. So I'm going to set that off to the side while I let it drain. Going to get this heat turned up, and I'll be back with y'all in just a moment. Okay, we're back. I'm ready to start putting the ground beef patties into the skillet. I've got it turned up, about medium high. Now the idea here is to be browning them. It's not going to be finishing them. We're going to finish them in the oven while we're making the gravy. So that's just going to be browning them up. I'm going to flip them over here in a second. And like I say, this is not to finish them. This is just to get a nice little color to them before we put them into the oven. Be back in a moment. Okay, this is looking pretty good. Let's see if we can get these flipped over without cracking them open. Do it with confidence. There we go. It's looking like a really good sear going on there. That one I can tell is going to be a problem child. So we'll give it another couple of moments. Then we're going to be popping it into the oven. I've got the oven set at 400 degrees. It's not going to be in there very long, just virtually a matter of minutes. But it's just enough to going to be finishing it while we're working on the sauce. Okay, I think I've got them browned up enough. I'll take them off. I'm going to put them on a baking sheet, using some parchment paper to just kind of save on the cleanup. And into the oven. We'll check on those in maybe 5 minutes here. In the meantime, let's get something going here. I'm going to start out with the onions. Always start with the onions. We want to get them good and caramelized. They take a little bit longer. The meat has been in there for about 5 minutes. Gonna pull it out, check the temperature. Ooh. Okay, that is registering nice and hot. So I think it's time for these to come out. Now, I think it's about time to start adding the mushrooms in. Here we go with some mushrooms. Now, mushrooms hold a lot of moisture, and we want to pull that moisture out of them so we can get those caramelized as well. Now, in order to do that, I'm going to put a little extra salt on them to help pull out the moisture. Now, this is probably going to take 4-5 minutes maybe, so we will come back then. This is looking pretty darn good, so it's time to do the next step. I'm going to add some minced garlic in here. Now we're just waiting a moment till we can start getting that aroma of the garlic coming up. When we start sensing that, then we're going to start adding the liquids in. Now at the same time, I'm going to add that bacon back in. Because of course everything is better with bacon. Now, you don't have to do this. If you don't do this part, just add about another half a cup of beef broth. But I'm adding a half a cup of wine here. I can get that aroma coming out already. I'm adding the wine because, of course, I told you this is not going to be a Swanson or banquet meal. This is going to be a bougie Salisbury steak. So I'm pulling out all the stops on this one. Now with the next step coming up, I'm coming back to this camera to show you, I've got some cornstarch in here. To that, I'm going to add a cup and a half of beef bone broth. Gonna whisk that up because that cornstarch is going to be acting as our thickener when it hits the heat. Now that just cooled it down some, so I'm going to crank the heat up just a little bit. We're going to try to simmer off some of the liquid and wait for the cornstarch to also help thicken it up. While we're waiting on that, let's start getting this plated up. I'd made some mashed potatoes earlier because, of course, Salisbury steak goes great with mashed potatoes. We'll load up one of these Salisbury steaks, and now we're going to be ready when the gravy is ready. Now, just in case it's not bougie enough, for our French chefs out there, I'm just going to add a little butter, and of course, I'm sure they don't want just a little butter, they want a lot of butter. And why did I do that? Just because I can. Okay, I think this is looking pretty good. I think it's time we plate it up. Here we go. This is what it looks like. This is going to be good. This is going to be hot. So let's hope that I don't burn myself too badly on this. Make sure I did some mushroom, bacon, the meat, the heat. Oh my gosh, this is really, really good. There is no way you're going to possibly confuse this with anything by Swanson or Banquet. This is worthy of serving to your guests. Try that on the mashed potatoes. This is great. Gunner's wanting some, but I'm afraid it's a little bit too messy for him. I've got to have another bite. This is unbelievably good. With that, if you like the video, hit the like button. Please consider subscribing, and I will catch you all next week. Thanks for watching.